Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeff Henry and Hans Peters.
So it's Jeff Henry and Hans Peters, not the other way around.
So welcome all. So we're going to talk today about how we can actually help remove the guesswork from some of the MLC pricing. But in getting there, we're going to start with what we see most of our customers actually focusing on, of how do I just get transparency, predictive economics around the SLA management. So quick introduction and then we'll get into it. I'm Jeff Henry, I'm the VP of Product Management. I have the machine learning, so the mainframe operational intelligence, so you may have seen me here earlier. And I have the dynamic capacity intelligence, which started with an acquisition we did earlier in the summer around the ZIT Consulting Group. And I'm happy to have with me Hans Peters, who is the former CEO of ZIT Consulting and the brains behind the system, so we'll be doing the majority of the talking.
I'm not only the brains behind it, I'm not the only brain behind it.
Oh, yeah.
So don't overestimate me. My name is Hans Peters, thank you very much, Jeff. And yes, we've been concentrating for many years already on MLC pricing and how we can actually improve the way that we can control the rolling for our average value. And that is what we're going to talk about this half hour or 28 minutes that are left. We're going to talk about how you can actually do that best. At least in our opinion, obviously, right? So basically, what we're going to talk about is MLC pricing itself, the influencing factors of the MLC pricing, then how you can actually remove the guesswork out of that MLC pricing. Jeff is going to talk about customer use cases and how this all aligns with operational intelligence. And obviously then we're going to give you a little summary. And if you have any questions later, please feel free to visit us at the booth anytime. First, we're going to have a look at the influencing factors of MLC pricing. And basically, very important with MLC pricing, as we can see here, is that we have the challenge that each and every manager needs to make sure, so a manager for production environments needs to make sure that the SLA objectives are being met. However, there's always this balance between meeting your SLAs and doing it all at a minimum price. And when we were talking about the acquisition, I was very surprised that on the top of every discussion that we had, there was the question, how much can a customer save? I said, wait a minute, this is not just about savings. This is about making sure that a customer can keep his service level agreements or even improve the service level agreements, hopefully at a better price. And that is what we're looking at.
Yeah, Hans, if I can add to that and give you a chance to take a break, take a drink. I think when I've walked around here, Hans always has a good group of people around his demo pedestal, so I think he's losing a little bit of his voice. So when we were doing the acquisition due diligence, as Hans said, one of the things that came back was we were pushing on a lot of the economics because that's what we had heard from a lot of our customers. And they came back to, it's about SLA management. So when we were talking to some of those customers during that time period, they reinforced the point that if I start with the simple visibility, the simple visualization of being able to see that rolling 4-hour average and what we might be able to do when a SLA starts tracking up and potentially breaking that peak, then I have the capability of making a decision. I have the capability of being able to automate some of that moving forward, which fit perfectly into what hopefully you're hearing from the rest of our strategy. How do you assure those systems? How do you automate as much as possible to remove a lot of the tedious aspects to it? And when we talked to some of those customers that had tried capping previously, they had failed pretty miserably because they weren't able to do it in a consistent process like this.
Yeah, because most customers were using capping as a tool to limit group capacity, limit defined capacity. But that also meant that customers were not flexible. And nowadays, you need to have flexibility. So it all needs to be proactive as well. So you need to be able to predict stuff. So predictable and, as Jeff already said, extremely important, make it transparent. When you have a peak, you want to make sure that you can explain to management and to financial people why you had the peak. If there is a reason for it, a good reason, like, hey, we had more revenue coming in, that is a tremendously good reason to have a peak. So the desired outcome of all that obviously is I achieve my SLA objectives. I do that in a very simple way, in a very simple and automated way, and all of it is within the budget, and it is all of a sudden predictable. That is what we want to achieve. However, there are so many influencing factors here. And I've probably missed several ones. But first of all, the first question is, what is your customer or your contract situation? Are you actually running AWLC, so Advanced Workload License Charge? Do you have a country multiplex license charge contract with IBM? Are you still running under parallel sysplex license charge? Which, by the way, if you do, seriously consider getting away from that. Or, what comes up more and more, do you have a month-by-month payment with IBM, which means your business as usual, BAU? One very important situation as well, are you currently, at the end of a contract year perhaps, over or under budget of your contract? So did you agree to a contract, AWC contract, with a flat payment? And do you actually use more capacity or less capacity? Right? If you use less capacity, then obviously you pay too much. If you use more, you have to pay extra, and you have to pay it list price normally. So both situations are not optimal. I'm aware of very many customers that actually tell me, oh, you know what? We have been on the spot with our prediction for the last 3 years. And I can guarantee you that all of these customers wasted a lot of money, because it's easy to be on the spot. You just let the system run. You set a cap, you let it run, and that's it. Which people are involved? And that's probably one of the most difficult factors. Because if you look at all these people that are involved, the CFO, the CIO, procurement, they have a completely different view than, for instance, Ops VP director, Ops VP, it's Ops VP, the Ops director, capacity planners, they all have a completely different view. The SysProcs, their major goal is to have the system running. It's not their major goal to save money, right? And I totally understand it. Operators, they don't know anything about pricing normally. Why should they care? It's not part of their job. When we look at the service level agreements and the workload priorities, it is very important to understand that that's a huge influencing factor. Because, obviously, what are your service level agreements? How do you keep them? You're not going to earn very many bonus points, many kudos with your superiors if you reduce the MSUs, but that leads to a deterioration of online performance. That was not the idea behind it. So what are your current SLAs? What's your LPAR priority, your workload types, et cetera, et cetera.
So let me give Hans another break here for a minute.
And I excuse, but it's the dry air that kills me here.
So earlier today when we were talking about operational intelligence, and I'll talk later about how these come together, one of the key ways that we've been able to bring this to market in a way that solves unique needs is by working hand in hand with our customers through the validation program. It's what true agile development is. When you look at some of the things that IBM announced earlier today and that you've seen from an IBM Z14 announcement, they're talking about container-based pricing, which takes kind of what they've been doing around like mobile workload pricing to the next step, where you can actually see and measure some of those things. We're looking at, can we extend the model that we have to be able to take advantage of that as well? And if there are customers that are already down the path of looking at container-based pricing with IBM, we'd love to work with you so that we actually build this together. Other customers that are just interested would still love to have you in the validation program, but we are looking specifically for those folks that are looking at container-based pricing today.
So in the last part of what has a huge influencing factor is the architectural situation and your setup, your technical setup. What software stack do you actually have? How did you spread the software over the different LPARs? And very important as well, what are your technical WLM settings? Now, we need to remove the guesswork. We need to have a real-time overview of what is actually going on. But we need to take all these factors that we've seen before into consideration. So basically, we need to have a capacity decision matrix in the middle that everybody understands, and where everybody can actually feed his or her input into. So where we have on the left-hand side up and left-hand upper side, we have the contract situation. We have the people involved, and all of this goes into this matrix. We have the architecture and the technical setup. We have the SLAs and the workload priorities. All of that goes into one central setup matrix. And all of that translates into the setup matrix that we have in CA Dynamic Capacity Intelligence. So now let me explain a little about, we're not going to go into much detail, a little bit about CA Dynamic Capacity Intelligence. Basically, we have a look at how we take the guesswork out of MLC pricing and out of capacity optimization. For that, we need to know at any given time how much capacity is being used and how much capacity is also being used for workloads that are not critical. The solution is we need to continually analyze the workload situation. Continually means every 5 minutes. So we do not have to do that on a second-to-second basis. That would be too much of an overhead, and from a rolling 4-hour average standpoint, it is not necessary. We automatically, we automatically move capacity from one LPAR to the other. Actually, it should be defined even a little differently. We change the capacity limits. If we see that one LPAR uses a lot of capacity for workload that is not critical, while at the same time another LPAR is struggling to do the critical workloads, we move the capacity down for the one LPAR and move it up, so the capacity limit, for the other LPAR. And with that, automatically, we change the balance between the LPARs, but we do not change the total.
Yeah, so this was another one of those areas that was a key differentiation. we saw other people in the market that were moving work around, moving workloads around. And when you do that, or when you, and just to fit a pricing model, shove everything on one LPAR, or do something that's unnatural to your business simply to try to save money, you're adding risk, and it becomes a nightmare to manage control. So being able to focus on changing the capacity limit instead of moving the work is a much more optimal approach and far less risky.
So basically what we do is we automate capping changes. And we do that based upon your definitions. So it is a very individual thing. We've been asked so often that customers says, give us a default setting. I say, no, wait a minute. We can only give you a default setting when you're a default customer. And that just doesn't exist, right? The result that we see very often in the beginning already is an 8% savings. That sounds like, no, that's not too much, is it? Hey, wait a minute, we're talking about real money here, right? 8%, and you do not even have a degradation in performance, you probably have an improvement even. We've seen so many customers that are actually capping development in the morning just because they expect to have a peak in production at 11 o'clock. Then at 12 o'clock you see that they free up development. Why should you do that if you have 1 or 2 peaks per month? That means that during 18 days per month you're limiting development without any financial gain. Why don't you do it when you really need it? That's these 8% savings. So you have more, you can do more, and you even save doing it.
Yeah, so Hans, let me jump in again. So some of the areas that we looked at on the last slide, and then the visualization here, it comes to life when you really actually see it from a demo standpoint. But the visualization was one of the big keys. We have customers who competitors have given a solution as part of their ELA, and they said, I'm not using it. It's too hard to configure, it's too hard to set up. This went in simply, it gives me a visualization, and now I can see where those gaps are between where I have a rolling 4-hour average peak, that if I was to move some of that, what you've defined as non-time critical workload out, that I could reduce that. I can also see those gaps visually of where I've got a capped rolling 4-hour average that's much higher than my MSU usage. So capacity that I could use, capacity that I could free up for my development teams. So when he says ease of use, when we talk about the visualization, the dashboards that they brought to the table just allow you to actually visualize and then continuously iterate. One of the most powerful things that their team demoed to me as we were bringing them on board was one of the big customer accounts that they have that are pretty conservative. And originally it was just like, make sure my SLAs don't miss. And then as they iterated upon it, they said, oh, I could save some money here. I can free up some capacity for development there. And the iteration process continued because there's a near real-time visualization of what's going on in the system. It's not a 2 months after the fact, here's your bill.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes accurate. The interesting part is that this customer nowadays has the opinion that if he doesn't get any complaints about the performance, that they didn't save enough. So they're trying to really run it at an absolute low. And very often what we see, especially with customers that have not been really serious about capping in the past, we see up to 25% of savings in MSU cost even, either in MSU reduction or in some instances even in MSU cost at customers after 6 to 8 months, when the whole process of implementing, slowly but surely implementing the product, improving the settings, trying to go the next step when that all is done. The product itself, and I'm more than happy to present it to you. I hope JD is going to help you with it. So I'm more than happy to present it to you, but the product itself is extremely easy to use. We always wanted to have a product, and I love the famous KISS principle, keep it short and simple. That is exactly my credo. And that is what we've been doing with the product. As Jeff said, it has we think, a very easy GUI, easy to use, that gives you all the information that you need to take the decisions. If you would want to manually interfere, you can see in a short term, just with one glance, whether you need to take a decision, whether you want to interfere, yes or no. Normally you wouldn't have to. If you would have to, then change your settings so that you may have to do it now, but not in future again. And I'm very happy to hand over now to Jeff.
Hey, so now you have to jump in and save my voice, is that it?
No, I don't think that's going to happen, thanks.
So I've talked about some of the customers that we talked about, and I want to hit on one customer use case here, because this is when I look backwards on what I heard from Credit Suisse. They were working with ZIT before the acquisition, much in the same way we do from a validation standpoint. So originally, this product was a much more complex, much more customized rules, much more hands-on. You can do a lot, but it wasn't necessarily easy. And they went through the redevelopment, re-architecture effort to bring in, let's keep it simple. So the KISS principles. And a lot of it was based off of feedback from customers like this. I want to start with that SLA management. I want to be able to iterate simply. I want to be able to then extend in areas where I can actually use some customized rules. So one of the things you'll see us continue to do is invest in the roadmap that they were already under to say, let's keep the simple code base with the visualization active and then extend value beyond that. So whether I'm talking about new pricing models, or whether I'm talking about customized rules, or whether I'm talking about some of the integrations that I'll go into next, we're trying to make sure that we keep that simplicity to get started. But the only way that I can really do that is by getting feedback. What's simple to me may not be what is simple to you. So, and the example I used earlier around the operational intelligence and machine learning, we're trying to always invest in 3 levels of engineering effort in an agile operations, agile development way. The first is, here's what we just GA'd. So here it is. You have a product. We've got some great customer references. You can iterate and see the value on your own. The next step is what we're building next. What's the prototype? What's the code that we want to bounce off of you to see, does this work? So we have a smart bar in the back. We've got some blockchain demos. We've got some DevSecOps demos. We've got some mainframe as a service demos. We've got some machine learning demos. One of the ones last year that we showed that we're delivering this year with the operations intelligence was simply clustering. Well, our architects came up and said, here's 80 things, and it was just this, you couldn't make any sense of it. Without getting that design, how are you working with your teams? How do we make it simple enough that you don't have those skills problems? We can't convert from the art of the possible smarty pants math to the how does it actually get consumed by your teams? So again, it's a plug for more in the validation program, more of that kind of partnership. Credit Suisse has been a great one to work with in that account. I want to go forward and actually talk about a couple of the integration points, because one of my pet peeves is, although it's good for us to be able to show a combined solution, integration for integration's sake doesn't really help anybody. So what's the business case? What's the use case that's driving the integration? And you've seen this picture several times now around how we're focusing on this modern software factory. But what I said in my earlier presentation remains true here as well. It's not so much what are the 4 different areas around the outside of this wheel or the circle. It's the arrows between them. So how do we take the insights that we're seeing, that we're investing in that machine learning, connect it with, say, the automation to get the simple things out of the way, to automate root cause analysis, as Hans said, to automate the decision-making matrix to move the capacity around so it's not a manual effort, but it's based off of the decision matrix that you all set up in the first place. What was critical? What wasn't critical? What are the priority levels? And then ultimately, we need to be able to manage the economics. I mean, we've heard from every customer, and certainly the way we deal with it here within CA is we've got a big target on our budget line because it's usually pretty big. You know, mainframes have been around and been invested in. 80-ish% of the data that your companies reside or that your companies leverage for mission critical applications sits on the mainframe. A lot of that new application development may be somewhere else, but it comes back and taps that mainframe. So how do we focus on the use cases that bring these things together? The arrows that bring this wheel to life. So one that we did between this acquisition, so summertime, and now, that is out on the showroom floor as well, is linking capacity intelligence to operational intelligence. So the simple use case is, I have this green highway. I won't go into it in a lot of detail. We can go into it over there as well. And if you saw any of our previous presentations, you've probably heard it over and over again. But the net is, this is what normal looks like. We've learned from your SMF data. We've learned from your historic data. What does normal look like for your system? And we've plotted it out. The dark green is the normal. Then you get two system or variance levels beyond that as you go lighter green and lighter green. And you can see the line of what your normal rolling 4-hour average is. Well, in this model, you see in the last 5, 10, 20 minutes, it's starting to go out of norm. So an anomaly has been hit. Why? So you're managing this capacity. Why to go out of norm? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to miss your SLA? Are you going to move capacity around? How's it set up? So the key is to be able to trigger off of that anomaly, set some automation in place to get yourself back into norm, and then figure out what's going wrong. So the integration triad that we're working on and that we're demoing here to get customer feedback on is, I bring capacity intelligence into this model. I'm able to actually show what the rolling 4-hour average is, and the other graph is a dashboard of what the LPAR's workload making up that 4-hour average is. And then as I go out of norm, I can trigger an event. I can trigger an Ops MVS automation event. I can trigger a one automation platform process event. Or I can trigger an analysis to say, what is the application that's causing the problem? So the linkage to mainframe application tuner that we've been prototyping as well. So that's the triad we're trying to bring into play here. So it's not just about managing your capacity, and it's not just about managing your operations. It's how do I tie those things together for that economics, predictive economics platform in the middle. And again, love to have more of your feedback to those sessions in the back. So in summary, there are a lot of different factors that actually come into play here from a capacity standpoint. And you can either let it be managed or let it happen to you, or you can proactively manage it. And right now, most of our customers tell us that they're at the mercy of their SCRT reports, or at the mercy of, here's what your bill is after the fact. They're reacting. The information about all the factors that are actually contributing to that can be made available to you in near real time every 5 minutes on what's contributing to those pieces. And then based off of that decision matrix that you uniquely set up on what's business critical to you, what's time critical to you, what might not be time critical to you on different priority schemes, you can automate off of it so that it's not a manual capping effort. And then with dynamically capacity intelligence, you can tie that automation back to the decision matrix and into those other areas of the portfolio. It's not a product for product's sake play. So to wrap up, these are some of the other recommended sessions. This is what's happening if Hans keeps his voice, or that we pull in JD or somebody else to help him with. Some of the demos that are out there, we'll take questions on the demo floor. And the only other thing that I'll ask is, or that I'll say is thank you for those of you that have already been participating with us in the validation. And I really want to come back next year and thank you directly because you're participating in the validation of this one. So thanks again.
Thank you.